Hello, I'm Jeremy Vine, and this is Panorama. Many British Muslims have divided loyalties. Something others are happy to exploit.
He changed because of all the people that he was hanging around with. He believed that he was on the right path, he found the right religion, this was the right way of life.
We have hatred for you.
We
have
report
hatred.
the
All these people
facts.
here.
We report the facts.
All these people here hate you.
Oh, come on.
One day we will rise up and overthrow the phenomenon.
Until now, radicals have been tolerated, even courted, so long as they denounce violence. But that may be about to change.
Islam is not compatible with democracy.
My question to you really is, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution?
Britain's Muslims feel picked on and spied on, apparently. At the same time, we're told the threat of terrorism is still severe. And just because there hasn't been a major incident since 7/7 certainly does not mean that threat has gone away. So how do you reassure Muslims that they are not under suspicion, while at the same time exploiting all potential intelligence opportunities? It's not easy, as Richard Watson now reports.
Britain's southwest coast, noted for beaches rather than bombs. It's the last place you'd expect a terrorist attack. But on May the 22nd last year, Nikki Riley, a 22-year-old convert to Islam, walked into a packed family restaurant in Exeter and tried to commit mass murder with a homemade bomb. It blew up in his face as he prepared to attack, and dozens of injuries and deaths were avoided. So who is Nikki Riley? A social misfit, he suffered from Asperger's syndrome and had a low IQ. He was radicalised while living in Plymouth with his mum. The internet played a part, but police sources told us they believe an extremist in the local community must have held his hand.
He changed because of all the people that he was hanging around with. He believed that he was on the right path, he found the right religion, this was the right way of life. And he was just taken in by it. He would have had to have instructions or guidance from someone. There's no way Nikki's got the capability to do that.
Hello, Richard. Good to see you.
This senior policeman is driving policy to prevent young Muslims like Riley from becoming radicalised.
Preventing violent extremism is an agenda that binds us, it doesn't divide us.
Yes.
Sir Norman Betterson believes that working with local Muslim leaders is vital.
Al-Qaeda is a brand. Al-Qaeda is a virus. And what we're trying to do, in policing terms, is identify those who would be susceptible to that virus. We can't do it ourselves, we've got to do it with the community. So we're really trying to get upstream in stopping the vulnerable schoolboy of today presenting himself as a martyr in 6 years' time.
The big prize, then, is to persuade Muslims to volunteer intelligence. This is vital against a background of continuing support for extremist ideology. I've been investigating the rise of extremism for the BBC for 8 years now, since before the 9/11 attacks on America. It hasn't always been an easy ride.
Hang on, no problems. No.
Okay, that's cool, no problem.
Back in 2004, before the London bombings, these extremists were open about their contempt for democracy and their praise for Al-Qaeda.
When the two planes magnificently went through those buildings.
Killing of innocent civilians can't be right.
It can't be right, according to you. According to you, it can't be right, okay? According to Islam, it's absolutely right. He's the one in love with it, or he's the one in hate?
The group I filmed, Al Mahajiroun, was led by Omar Bakri Mohammed. He's now been banned from the UK.
Break the psychology of the occupiers
by hitting back in their own homelands.
New legislation means extreme messages like these are against the law. Extremists may be more careful now, but their fight against the British state goes on. East London in November, and former supporters of Al Muhajiroon are holding a meeting. I was invited to an event at the local council-run arts centre by a new incarnation calling itself Islam for UK.
This is the state we find ourselves in today. Prisoners being held, Muslims being attacked, demonized on the media. We find them they're speaking about Islam left, right and centre, an attack on Islam on all levels.
Basically, it's the same kind of message I've been hearing for the best part of a decade now in Britain. Essentially, the Muslims are victims. They should align themselves with the international Ummah, not with Britain. They should overthrow democracy in Britain. It's a kind of psychological grooming in a way.
Which is Sheikh Mohammed. So as a special treat for our guests there, so they can put that in their panorama, and as a treat as well for Jackie Smith, we will hear from Sheikh Mohammed, the only person in fact who's been banned and named by the British government.
To those Muslims wherever you are, don't obey the law of the land. Do not obey man-made system. Obey only the command of Allah and the command of the Prophet Muhammad.
For years I've been invited to meetings like this. My presence has always been tolerated. But I never got the sense it was personal until I was approached by this man.
I remember all your...
How am I an enemy of Islam?
I remember all your recent programmes being very favourable towards Islam Muslims.
No, they've been neutral, they've been factual.
The mood quickly became more aggressive.
You're a liar.
I think you better tone down.
You're enemy to Islam Muslims.
Okay.
You're a liar, yeah, and you're a fabricator. That's
really?
your job.
Is that right?
That's your job.
Yeah?
You know it, and he even knows it. Check it.
It's
according to you,
paranoia.
Sheikh Omar Mohammed, according to you, Anjem Chowdhury are the godfathers of terrorism. Where's the evidence? You have none.
Yeah.
You don't have any, Richard.
I think you've got it.
I'm surprised you were invited to this conference.
Lower the tone. Lower the tone.
Look, all of us here have hatred for you.
Yeah. Why?
We have hatred for you.
We have hatred for you.
All these people here.
We report the facts.
All these people here hate you.
Oh, come on. Come on.
They hate you, Richard.
Well, why did Anjem Chowdhury invite us?
If they saw you in the dark anyway, they might see you.
That's a threat. Is that a threat?
That's not a threat at all. I said, if they saw you in a dark alleyway, they may be driven.
Are you threatening me?
I'm not threatening you at all. I'm not threatening you at all.
No, of course
I'm not threatening you at all.
No.
The man who invited me, Anjem Chowdhury, who used to be one of the leaders of Al Muhajiroon, stepped in.
We'd like to go in there, record some more. Yeah. Everyone calm down, it's fine. All right, okay, thanks.
Guys, calm down. We are second-class citizens. You represent an oppressive regime. This is the phenomenon of today. We are like Musa alayhi salam in the palace of Pharaoh. One day we will rise up and overthrow the Pharaoh.
MI5 and the police fear that support for extremism remains high, fanned by events in Gaza and elsewhere.
Run, you swine!
The recent Israeli attacks against Hamas created a surge of anger on British streets. Peaceful marches were at times exploited by those who support violence.
Behind every potential terrorist lies a grievance. So take a sense of grievance, take some influence, some external influence, either a personal influence from another person or an influence through the internet, and you've got a cocktail then of someone who could move from being aggrieved to wanting to be violent and carry out terrorist offences.
Those running counter-terrorism policy fear this anger, combined with a distorted version of Islam, is fueling extremism. They argue that influential preachers who persuade the young to reject British values make matters far worse. Sheikh Khaled Yassin is one of the stars of the preaching circuit. He doesn't support terrorism, but has radical views.
There's been no evidence that has surfaced, no bona fide irrevocable, irrefutable evidence that had been surfaced to show that there was a group called Al-Qaeda that did the September 11 bombings.
Doesn't embrace...
His lectures come close to preaching hate.
If you prefer the clothing of the Kafirs other than the clothing of the Muslims, most of those names that's on most of those clothing is faggots, homosexuals, and lesbians.
But does this kind of intolerance feed violence? Some involved in counter-terrorism believe it does and liken it to a conveyor belt. New recruits jump on board because they reject British values, and they're carried along to become far more extreme. Derby, a city which has had more than its fair share of radicals. Last year, a conference was advertised featuring Sheikh Yassin. We found the organiser, a medical school graduate. When it comes to her faith, she's far stricter than her parents, and against their wishes, she covers her face with a niqab.
Why did you choose Sheikh Khalid Yassin? Because he is a man who has some controversial views about some things, like homosexuality, for example. He's vehemently against homosexuality. And one might argue that in Britain that is a completely unacceptable point of view.
Well, homosexuality is not accepted in Islam, it's not accepted in Christianity.
But we live in Britain.
But it doesn't, we're not discriminating against it. If you ask a question, is it allowed in Islam? It's not.
Muslim conservatives like Sheikh Yassin hold deeply controversial views. But should they be shunned because they preach against democratic values, or should they be courted or even funded because they speak out against terrorism? This difficult question has split those working in counter-terrorism.
On the very basic philosophical level, we have to say, Islam is not compatible with democracy.
Abdurrahim Green is a popular preacher who converted to Islam 20 years ago. His internet broadcasts get hundreds of thousands of hits, and the Metropolitan Police have recently sought his advice.
You're on YouTube, for example, saying things like Islam is incompatible with democracy. That's a provocative statement. You're a British citizen.
Well, I think if you go back and you listen to my whole lecture on democracy, I quite clearly say that if by democracy we mean the people have the right to legislate in opposition to what God has legislated, a Muslim can't accept that. We believe that what God has made lawful is lawful, what God has made unlawful is unlawful.
But then you can't accept man-made law then? If you accept that point of view, you can't accept man-made law in Parliament just down the road.
Well, yes, that's true from the point of view of how I believe it. However, that doesn't mean that as a Muslim I'm not obliged to follow those laws.
You see, but the police don't police ideas. The police don't police ideology. We police violence. So am I prepared to talk to somebody that sees the world differently to me? Yes, I am. Am I prepared to tolerate that person inciting others to violence? No, I'm not.
That's fine, and I'm for it in the short term. There's a short-term aim, but let's have a look at the possible long-term damage.
Sheikh Musa Omani was the first imam to be appointed to a British university and has a track record of fighting extremism. For him, using the radicals to help fight terror is a dangerous path, even if they reject violence.
In a way, it's endorsing certain acceptable points of view. Now, when those people are endorsed, the question is that moderate Muslims are going to endorse them as a whole, and that's the danger.
The husband is allowed to prevent her from evil, to apply some type of physical force. This is a type of very light beating. This type of beating is not allowed to leave any type of mark.
My question to you really is, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution?
I totally, absolutely hope and believe that I am part of the solution. I want to be part of the solution. Throughout the years, 20 years I've been a Muslim, I've surely have said some pretty radical things and maybe even written some radical things in the past. But one thing I've been very consistent on, and it's been very clear to me always, that terrorism, participating in terrorist activities, violent, revolution is not something that I've ever thought was part of the religion of Islam.
That interview raises some fascinating questions. The police have been only too happy in the past to work with people like A.R. Green because they thought that was the best way of keeping Britain safe. But when public money is involved, that policy is far more controversial.
Azad Ali advises the Metropolitan Police and the Association of Chief Police Officers. He also writes a blog. He recently wrote how he was working his socks off for an Islamic State and how it should be led by the political leader of Hamas. Hamas won elections in 2006, but has also been behind suicide bombings and rocket attacks on Israel. Azad Ali's organisation, the Muslim Safety Forum, has just been promised £150,000 by the Home Office.
But the key question is support for Hamas acceptable in that context, in the context of someone receiving public funds?
Beyond the pay grade of a cop.
Well, you can answer this, though, in the context of ACPO, surely, because he does advise ACPO as well.
He has advised ACPO, past tense.
Is he going to again?
Who knows, but...
well, I mean, has this latest controversy added to that debate about whether he will again?
The latest controversy has made it very unlikely that he will advise ACPO in future.
The Home Office told us that decisions on which organisations to fund are subject to robust scrutiny, and they won't fund groups where they have evidence of them encouraging discrimination or undermining democracy. Support for Azad Ali may be about to end, but Panorama has learned there is a more fundamental shift afoot in an effort to undermine the terrorists. There's about to be a sea change in government policy.
Our source, a senior Whitehall counter-terrorism official, told me, "We want to move away from just challenging violent extremism. We now believe we should challenge people who are against democracy and state institutions." His whole message to me was that in the past, Britain has been too timid.
This is welcome news for some.
Those who preach hate, those who preach divisions, those who create hatred within societies, I think they need to be isolated. We need to empower the mainstream Muslim leadership and the scholars so they can actually hold the arguments and debates within the Muslim society.
The beginnings of the project.
Some moderate Muslim scholars welcome this new approach because it could bring a more tolerant society. But they warn this will have no impact on terrorism.
These are issues of cohesion and not issues of terrorism. You have to segregate the two very clearly, the issues of cohesion and the issues of terrorism.
The government may say the two are linked, of course.
No, they're not. People who are against violence would not necessarily be for homosexuality. You know, those who are against female rights, women's rights, are not necessarily for violence.
The police and MI5 have succeeded in preventing a major attack since 7/7, and that is a big success. But in terms of preventing radicalisation, senior police sources told Panorama the policy is failing. Travelling across Britain to make this film, we found there's a fundamental problem: trust.
Me as an Asian man, if I smack you in your mouth now, are you going to go around the whole world looking for all Asians?
Of course not.
Well, there you go. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know you.
We're being victimised. Listen, it is propaganda.
You're a British citizen,
I'm a British citizen, yeah.
So you're proud of your country?
Of course I'm proud of my country.
Yeah, so therefore...
And the people who were behind the 7/7 bombings, who I believe personally, it wasn't nothing to do with them lads.
Oh,
nothing whatsoever. Nah, it's a lot of bollocks, man. It's a load of bollocks.
I found an alarming lack of trust in the state and British institutions, and many Muslims are angry about the lack of trust in them.
If a Muslim was to speak about a foreign policy, straight away they get labelled as a terrorist, or this person's about to blow themselves up. I was on the train going to London, and I had some fruits, in my bag, and as I opened my bag, when the fruits dropped, and then everybody in the train went, I was like, it's not a bomb, it's an apple.
Many young Muslims said if society doesn't trust them, how can they trust the police? A key part of the government's counter-terrorism policy, known as Contest, is designed to tackle this. £80 million is being spent on community projects to help build trust, but there's a problem. Any hint of government control can fatally undermine credibility. Musa Admani has been working to create a set of agreed Islamic rulings condemning terror.
We'll be able to separate the misinterpretation of the extremists from the true meaning of jihad.
He's renowned as an inspirational preacher. Last year, his organisation won £180,000 from the Home Office to create a set of training manuals which would be used to try to de-radicalise extremists. The Home Office wanted him to work in partnership with a business consultant whom he knew and had worked with before. It should have been a perfect combination, and he had a clear view of her role.
The project was purely Muslim project, was supposed to be run by Muslim project, delivered by Muslims. She would have a role in the, what you call, coaching side, writing the material.
The Home Office was looking to the consultant, a white non-Muslim, to ensure its project to turn extremists around delivered results. This consultant says she was becoming anxious about slow progress and wanted to drive things forward. But Mr. Admani felt she was getting too hands-on and feared this would be disastrous. He says it would have led to a loss of trust among the extremists he was trying to reach, not least because she'd worked for an MOD think tank and had organised workshops for NATO, among other clients.
A person with military background, with establishment contacts, wants access to see that material. How could we allow it?
And you think that would have put you in a very difficult position?
It's not. It would render the whole project illegitimate. Full stop.
The consultant says Mr. Admani is wrong. She never wanted a central role. What is clear, though, is the Home Office were insisting on her involvement. No consultant, no project. Pressure from the Home Office over progress continued, and things eventually came to a head.
The Home Office trying to push another agenda to us after the signing of the agreement was quite bizarre. That was wholly unacceptable. The question was, what do? You are in it. Either back out or let them terminate the project.
What did you decide to do?
Let them terminate the project.
The Home Office did not comment specifically on this case, but said that they keep projects under continuous review, and if the benefits are not clear, then they'll stop funding them. While there's no evidence of a sinister motive, Musa Admani felt treated unfairly, a valuable ally who feels burned by the experience.
If they don't trust us, they should not approach us this far. The whole working is on trust.
These kinds of suspicions are creating a difficult climate for government projects designed to prevent extremism.
The whole prevent agenda for me is slightly flawed because I think it's being targeted in the wrong way, where the major issues are around exclusion, and that's what we need to start tackling.
Back in Derby, Shaukat Lal has received £100,000 to prevent violent extremism, but worries about the real agenda.
There are members of the community who feel very strongly about what the prevent agenda is about.
What is the government trying to achieve with prevent here?
Clearly, they want community-led intelligence. That's clear. If you just take myself as an example, as being chairman of the Derby Muslim Forum, there are already issues about where the funding has come from and what we're trying to do, and those within my own community have clearly said that people like myself that they're acting as spies or acting as intelligence officers.
Oh, you've been accused of being a spy already?
Myself, yeah. Now, if somebody wants to give me an Aston Martin or and provide me with this paid salary, then I'm fine with that. But those are the accusations that people like myself and other members of the forum have had to deal with.
But Shaukat Lal may have some reason to be suspicious.
few weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of my sources who's been at the heart of the government's counter-terrorism work. He told me something quite extraordinary. He says that some of the projects being funded by the Prevent programme are actually being used to trawl for intelligence about radicals in towns and cities across Britain.
One source told us that many intelligence analysts are already in place. More controversially, the source claimed that virtually every Muslim who's spoken out about foreign policy grievances could be placed on an intelligence database. We have no other confirmation of this, but if true, it will fuel suspicions.
I'm horrified, and in fact the whole community would be as well, because there's already suspicion about this money being spent on intelligence and also working within communities like that. There are people who now fear that when they go to mosque they're being watched and their sermons are being recorded. And if that is the case, then it's obviously creating a wedge between the Muslim community and the mainstream society.
Let me put the question to you directly. Are Prevent projects being used as Trojan horses to gather that kind of information?
Let me give you a direct answer: no. Prevent is much more holistic, much more long-term, much more engaging than the sort of tactic you described.
Not dedicated intelligence?
It's not dedicated intelligence.
And you're not aware that they're being infiltrated by MI5 or Special Branch or anything like that?
Now, there are other aspects of police strategy that you're familiar with the contest programme. I'm talking to you about Prevent at this end of the spectrum. Pursue, at the other end of the spectrum, will use any means available to get the information that's required to prosecute people who are committing criminal acts. But that's not the Prevent agenda.
Today, the Home Office told us that Prevent is not about spying, and accusations that it is could undermine vital work. With radicalisation still on the rise, the Prevent agenda is changing fast. The dilemma for Britain has been whether to work with the radicals because they reject violence or isolate them because of their anti-British views. Our sources suggest the policy hawks are winning their own ideological battle inside Whitehall, and a new, tougher approach is on the way to curb the homegrown terrorist threat.
Richard Watson with a difficult calculation there, and one that could have the direst consequences if they get it wrong. Don't forget our website, bbc.co.uk/panorama. Give us your views and get more information. Next week, the government's ordered banks to support small and medium-sized firms through the recession. But is that what's actually happening? Theo Pafitis, who's been running his own businesses for 26 years, finds out.
Chef Rick Stein reveals a tragic family history in Who Do You Think You Are? Next here on BBC One. D.I. Moses Jones is closing in on the killer on BBC Two. And on BBC Four, a new series sniffs the bouquet of the fine wine trade.
Last Red Nose Day, thousands of you had fundraising money for Comic Relief. Just £30 pays for young carers like Jack to spend an hour away from their responsibilities. So get a free fundraising kit and get involved. Call 0345 605 8000 or go online and do something funny for money.
Nature's Great Events continues Wednesday at 9 on BBC One. If you missed the last episode, it's available now on BBC iPlayer.
Can 4 top sportsmen get to grips with the bobsleigh and qualify for the British Championships in just 10 days? That's the challenge tonight at 10:35. But right now on BBC One and BBC HD...